In this course, I'm going to guide you through how to get roles and permissions set up in Laravel. And this is a kind of DIY thing. And the reason I say that is because there are a lot of packages that allow you to implement this very quickly just by, pulling them in, setting them up, and you're good to go. But sometimes I struggle with these kind of things because often these packages give me too much, and I just want a very simple role and permission based system that still works really well, but allows me to just customize it if I need to change things later on. Of course, if you're pulling packages in, you're kind of stuck with them if you implement them into your project. So in this part, I'm just going to walk you through pretty much what this does. We'll take a look at a little demo of how this all works, and then we'll go ahead and build this out. So first thing is I just want to take a look at the database structure, because this really is the core concept that we're covering here. The most complicated thing about this is how to set relationships up between things so we can effectively check whether people have permission. So in this case, we have our standard users table. And just very, very simply, and you could keep it as simple as this if you wanted to, users have certain permissions. Now you can see that the columns here are user ID and permission ID. So we have some reusable permissions that we can create by name and assign to a particular user. That will be put into this pivot table. So we have a many-to-many relationship set up between these. So for example, let's just go with this for now. Let's say we had a permission in here to edit posts, maybe on a forum. So you would create the name out like this, so something lowercase and a kind of action. So can they edit posts? You want to kind of make it read really nicely. So what I would want to do is somewhere, and you can either do this manually or you could do this on sign up or something like that. And I'm just working within Roots here. I have my user that I'm currently signed in as, and I would say something like give permission to, and then I would go ahead and give the name of this, so edit post. So reads really nicely, and I took the inspiration from this from another package, just the kind of naming convention, but it kind of makes sense. Give permission to edit posts, and this can be absolutely anything. So if we go ahead and run this, give that a refresh, notice that what I'm also doing is pulling up a Laravel debug bar, so we'll be installing this and checking this as well. Now we have a little error here, so I'm just going to go ahead and change this to give. You probably noticed that. Give that a refresh, and there we go. So I've given permission for this user now to edit posts. So that's obviously been put inside of users permissions. We have user ID 1 has permission to edit posts, simple as that. So to go ahead and actually check this, so if we were to either do a die dump or something like that, we can say, does this user have permission to do this? Now, the way that we're going to do this is through Laravel's authorization method on our user model or on any model. So I can say very simply, user can edit posts, and it integrates really nicely. So you would do this maybe within a view or a controller, something like that. Essentially though, we're going to be building out some custom directives, so you can actually use this in views already, but then we're going to be implementing that for roles as well. So you can very easily and cleanly integrate this into your templates, and we'll take a look at that later. So if I give that a refresh, obviously we get a true because I can edit posts. Now, if I wanted to revoke permission, so if I wanted to not allow a user to edit posts anymore, I can very simply do that by saying user withdraw permission to, and really this is kind of only if you're implementing some kind of admin panel to allow users to be giving permission or withdrawing permission, but I'm going to withdraw permission to edit posts. Give it a refresh, go ahead and revert back to the can method, and you can see that we now get false. Now we're going to be implementing a couple more methods around this, just more for kind of flexibility if you wanted to do this. But that is pretty much it. So let's just cover roles very quickly, just so you can see how these work, and then we'll go and get on with the rest of this. So you can see that's been removed. Now I want to talk about roles. So let's say we had two roles, and this is kind of probably typical for an application. You would have an admin role, and we would duplicate this down, and we would maybe have a user role. So essentially, when you go ahead and register a user, you would assign this role to a particular user, and then as part of that, users or roles would have permissions. So it kind of gets a little bit complicated, but essentially what we're doing now is under roles permissions, we're creating which role has which permission. So maybe only admins have the ability to edit posts, but users don't. So what we can now do is under users and roles, which is a separate pivot table, I can maybe on registration assign this particular user or any user that signs up the role of a user and not an admin. And then maybe I could manually add a user to be an admin if I wanted to. So now what we can do is, again, just use the same method. So let's do a die dump on user can edit posts. Now, at the moment, my user that I have signed in with, ID of 1, if we come over here, is only a user, as we've seen. So I shouldn't have the ability to edit posts, and I don't. Now, if we were to go over and change this user, so let's come over to the database again, and let's say I wanted to change this user over to an admin, and they can have multiple roles as well. It will work in exactly the same way, but I guess typically you would only have one role per user. So let's go over, give that a refresh, and now I do have access, or I can edit posts because I am an admin. So this is fully flexible. You can assign specific permissions to users, even if they already have a role if you wanted to. You could create another role as a super user, which allowed a little bit more permission than an admin, so a super admin, for example. Really, you can just do whatever you want with this. As long as you have the permissions in here by default, you can go ahead and do whatever you want to and assign them to different roles. So like I said, aside from this, what we're going to be doing is covering how to really flexibly implement this into our views. So let's just go over to the views and let's come over to our layouts. Now in the navigation, what I'm going to be covering is how to do things like this. So role admin, then we want to show an admin panel in the top just here. So we can see this. I am an admin at the moment. If I just come over to the homepage here, you can see that we do have admin panel just at the top. And if I go ahead and revoke that, so let's say I wanted to change the user role over to just a user, go ahead and save that, then that no longer appears there. And you would have noticed there was something else there as well. If we come over to home.blade.php, we have here can edit posts. Now this is a Blade directive that already exists within Laravel, so you can just use that right off the bat. You don't need to create that one yourself, but I'll be showing you how to create this custom one here if that's going to be useful to you. Now, last but not least, we're also going to look at middleware as well. So for example, if you wanted to protect a specific route and say, well, they must be an admin, well, you can do that as well. So if I come over to admin, I can't access this. And at the moment, what I'm just doing is throwing a 404 with permissions. I always like to throw a 404 so it doesn't look like a user doesn't have permission, just so it's kind of hidden away. But of course, if I come over to the database again, change this over to admin, go ahead and save this, give it a refresh, I have access to a potential admin panel. So there we go. That's pretty much what we're going to be covering. Like I said, there are packages that do this, but I think it's always a good idea just to dive in and do these things yourself. And then later on, if you want to use a package, you can switch it out and do that instead. Okay, so let's jump over and get this all set up.